I have 729.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
I do too. I have 729 and 47, 48, 49 seconds. But yeah, we need to give folks a bit to come on.
I've noticed that when I go to like if you go to the web page and you click on the video, you can't get to it. You have to, I don't know, it has to like find you almost. That sounds crazy, I know.
You mean the Facebook page?
No, like I'll have to maybe be scrolling, and then all of a sudden it will say maybe to the side, oh, there's a live thing that you can do. I'm like, okay. So then I click on that and then I can get in. But if I go to the library page and I want to do that, and I'll click on it and I'm like, okay, any second now they're going to be live, and nope. I don't know.
Well, enough inside baseball, because we have 6 viewers right now that I can see.
Maybe they can enlighten me as to whether I'm doing something wrong.
Well, welcome again for Stories at Sundown. This is Michael McCullough, as usual, and I have with me one of my reference partners, Amy Witzke. She is a librarian at Willard Library, or a reference, sort of.
Reference, yeah. I work reference.
Yeah, we don't care about titles,
right?
A
wannabe librarian.
So yeah, this is we've done a couple of weeks with Alicia, and Amy is Alicia's partner on our podcast. Why don't you tell folks about our podcast before we do anything else?
Our podcast, we come out with one. We've done 6 now. We come out with one every Monday. Try to schedule it so it comes out at midnight. So I don't know. It just depends on when it decides to show up. We talk about things that are happening right now at the library, all these wonderful events that we're putting on. Alicia and I will like check in, see how we're doing. Are we hanging in there? We like to bring in guests. We've had Mac on a couple of times. We just had Sean on. What else? And we will recommend things that maybe we're reading or doing.
Hey, and speaking of, look, there's a comment from our boss, Matt Willis. Hey, this is live on YouTube too. Yeah, surprise. Surprise.
Surprise.
So welcome. As we've our new tradition, we keep changing this because we're experimenting with this, and we're so happy that you come to join us. Stories at Sundown. The last couple of times we've really looked at trying to develop an issue. And when Amy and I were like, frantically thinking about, well, what do we read? What do we read? Which is a real, it's a real question to answer. We landed on integrity. Integrity as a theme in literature, and started talking about the characters that we really loved. And we're going to share some of that. But before we do that, Amy, what is integrity to you?
I don't know if I can put it any simpler than, I think it's C.S. Lewis I just read. It's doing the right thing when nobody is watching.
When nobody is looking. Yeah. C.S. Lewis keeps coming up on this little webcast. He came up last week too. And I've been reading a lot of him too. Yeah. The integrity comes from the Latin word integer, which means complete. And I think it's one of the most misunderstood words in the English language, because people think of integrity and they think of, very positive values, which I would say integrity is, but they equate it with honesty and balance and stuff like that. But it's really just kind of an uncompromising commitment to who you are and being consistent in all weathers. And so I have to say that during this time, I gravitate towards characters. So I've been gravitating towards Westerns lately. I've been watching, and I don't watch much TV, but I've been watching Longmire on Netflix. And this, to me, is my answer. It makes me feel like I felt like when I was watching Gunsmoke as a kid, if that makes any sense. I mean, Walt Longmire is this, sheriff in, some fictional town in Wyoming who solves major crimes. And I just love the show. Have you seen it?
I haven't. I'm not a big Western fan.
Well,
you know what?
You need to change that.
My memories of Western are Sunday afternoon TV wasteland, is my opinion. As a kid who was dreading going back to school and there was nothing good on TV, that's my memory of Western. So not real great.
Yeah.
Maybe I had to find something to break that.
Well, yeah, I think Longmire is a good one, and much like Matt Dillon, in Dodge. I mean, his just. I think to get back to what we were here to talk about, which is integrity. In my favorite stories, a lot of the characters, they pay for their integrity, right? Sometimes,
Yeah.
they stick to who they are, even when people are condemning them for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I'm really curious because as we talked about what we wanted to read, and I'm going to let you go first because, yeah, you're going to read some, and I don't know if that's your first choice, Jane Austen, but I've never read any Jane Austen, so you need to tell me what's the fuss about. I just don't get it.
I don't understand. Okay. She snuck so much content, I mean, into her flowery language. She got away with stuff. She wrote about feminist issues before there was a word feminism. Maybe there was a word. I don't know. Social issues. She knew people. She could draw characters of people. You could meet that person through her words.
Yeah.
And you'd laugh with her about the silly things people do. A lot of what she's writing in this Pride and Prejudice, which I'm going to read from, is just Lizzie making fun of the people, but in good fun, not to be mean, but just because it's a diversion. It's these. She should probably make fun of herself too. But just celebrating the people and taking them for who they are at the same time. Because people are going to be people, and that's the way it is. Just enjoy them and laugh at them. But, yeah. But no, so she's the character in this particular thing that's got the integrity we're looking for.
Okay. Well, jump in, Amy.
Okay. All right. It's very small. I'm going to try.
And I'm going to mute my mic while you're doing this because I have some wind again, so we don't want it to interrupt Amy.
Okay. So this is from Pride and Prejudice, like I said, and there are going to be some spoilers, and if you haven't read it by now, I'm sorry. You should have read it. So, it's hundreds of years old, right? Okay. So she's just come from a meeting with Mr. Darcy, who's a very, very eligible bachelor. He's got a lot of money, and he's good looking, maybe short on charm, but he knows how to act. Okay. So that she should receive an offer of marriage from Mr. Darcy, that he should have been in love with her for so many months, so much in love as to wish to marry her in spite of all the objections which had made him prevent his friends marrying her sister, and which must appear at least with equal force in his own case, was almost incredible. It was gratifying to have inspired unconsciously so strong an affection, but his pride, his abominable pride, his shameless avowal of what he had done with respect to Jane, which is her sister, by the way, his unpardonable assurance in acknowledging, though he could not justify it, and the unfeeling manner in which he had mentioned Mr. Wickham, his cruelty towards whom he had not attempted to deny, soon overcame the pity which the consideration of his attachment had for a moment excited. So, she's refused him. He's in love with her, but she just finds that his actions she can't be with someone like that. Even if, she could, she's not full of money. She's going to need to marry somebody if she wants to have any kind of life that's not full of poverty. But she can't, because she can't respect him for what he's done or the things he does. So you're still off.
Technology.
Yes.
Yeah. Again, I can't claim to be have a lot of insight into it because I've not read it, but just what you just said, think of what a woman had to navigate at that time, and to stay true to values. I think that's what you're saying. And in this case, passing over what might considered at the time to be a good prospect.
Very good prospect.
Yeah. And I think that those are the kinds of characters that I really gravitate toward. I've mentioned on this webcast a couple of times that I'm a huge fan of James Lee Burke for that very reason, and I only have really started reading him in the last couple of years. And I do have something here that I in my list of things that we could be reading. I have a selection from one of his short stories that it's titled Texas City 1947, which was one of the worst industrial disasters in the history of the country. This blow up. It's not a historical fiction, but the story features this young man, this boy, whose father works in the oil fields, and he cheated on his wife, who killed herself, and then he brought his lover into the house, and she basically abused the kids, and the child and the kids had none to stick up for them. Now, if you read James Lee Burke, and I know that his darkness and his crime might not be his focus on crime and criminal activity and the depravity that we can come across in the world may not be everybody's cup of tea. But what I love about James Lee Burke is that his lead characters and some of his secondary characters too. Dave Robichaux is probably his most famous lead character, and Cleet Purcell, one of his most famous secondary characters. I mean, they have this, even though they lead these lives of addiction and problems and dysfunction and bad choices, they have this moral code that guides them in their lives, and they stick up. They give voice to the voiceless, it's just a recurring theme. One of the lines in one of his books, I think it was, oh boy, I'm gonna miss the line now. Oh, The Jealous Kind, was along the lines of, no matter how offensive and depraved people can be, recognizing that most of them are just doing the best they can with the lives that they've been given, right? Yeah. That sometimes people of integrity are navigating a world that has stuck a rod in them, so to speak, and they just have to live with that. And this little particular piece that I just wanted to read, because I just thought it was such a powerful quote. And his writing, again, it's crime fiction, but every now and then it just reaches out and grabs you. And by the way, we have all this stuff on Libby. We have it all on Hoopla, audio, all that stuff. So you can still check it out, even if you can't get to the print book. But this one it's called, as I said, it's called Texas City 1947. And it's from the short story collection, Jesus Out to Sea. And the placement, and the placement of these, in some cases it's in the West, and in some cases it's in his native Louisiana. And this particular case was in oil country in post World War II. And this is after his father abandoned them, and he never even knew if he'd survived this explosion. And this is later in the story when he is in a bar, and he's working in the oil industry now too.
So his father was in the explosion.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and he was badly burned, but he never knew whether he had survived or not. Okay. Well, he's in the bar now, and he sees that he survived, and he's reflecting on it. Sometimes he comes to me in my dreams, and I wonder if, ironically, all our stories were written on his skin back there in Texas City in 1947. Or maybe that's just poetic illusion purchased by time. But even in the middle of an Indian summer's day, when the sugarcane is beaten with purple and gold light in the fields, and the sun is both warm and cool and on your skin at the same time, when I know that the earth is a fine place after all, I have to mourn just a moment for those people of years ago who lived lives they did not choose, who carried burdens that were not their own, whose invisible scars were as private as the scarlet beads of Sister Roberta's rosary wrapped across the back of her small hand, and as bright as drops of blood ringed around souls of little people.
That's not something you read just one time.
No.
It's like a poem.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, especially when he's describing his beloved land and the people that he came from. And so one of the things I just find so interesting, especially when he's writing about New Orleans area, or that part of Texas close by, is that on one hand he can write very bitterly and sharply about the avarice and the corruption and that goes on all around, and yet at the same time write with love about the character of the people who came from there. And again, I kind of feel like his books in particular are just a study in integrity. And again and again in his characters, you see that they suffer ill consequences from not being willing to give up on that piece of them that they find to be true, even if it causes them problems.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of parallels in lives, and isn't that what literature is all about, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you see yourself in the people you read, or you see the people you know.
Yeah. Or sometimes you see the people you want to be,
Yeah. It's nice to read things and meet somebody in a book that you would not have run across ever, and you learn something about that type of person or that person.
Yeah. So you had something on your list that, again, I'd never heard of, and you got this from the public domain.
I did.
And just so you people are watching always know, I mean, we're always worried about reading too much of something that's copyrighted protected, because you need permission to do that. So, we're careful.
Right.
But anyway, Amy, tell us about what you're going to read.
I'm trying to keep them really short. You know what? There was a quote though that I wanted to read from. I forgot to read a Jane Austen quote. It's from another book called Mansfield Park, but I thought this was interesting to illustrate integrity. Anyway, she says, one of the characters in the book, "We have all a better guide in ourselves if we would attend to it than any other person can be." It's like, you know what to do, but will you let yourself do what you know you're supposed to do?
Yeah.
Anyway. So
read that again for me, please.
Okay. Yeah. "We have all a better guide in ourselves if we would attend to it than any other person can be."
Yeah.
And it's not the way anybody talks today. Nobody talks like that. This story that I found, it was a free book on Apple Books. It's supposed to be an English, full of short stories for an English classroom, teaching English. And it's from 1923. The book was published in 1923. This story was published around 1880. Let's say 1880. Let's say that. I don't remember exactly. Is that right? Yeah.
Somebody knows what you're reading.
Yeah, right. Oh, hey. Oh, yeah. That was Mansfield Park. Mansfield Park. This story is called "The Revolt of Mother." Mother in quotation marks, because it's one of those things where the husband calls her mother and she calls him father. It irritates me to no end, but that's how they talk. They're from New England, but I'm probably going to roll into a Southern dialect because that's just, I can't help it. I got family from the South. So.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Bear with me because there's a lot of dialect in here, and this is a tiny screen, like I said. Okay. By author. Who's the author? Mary E. Wilkins, Freeman. If you remember nothing else, Wilkins Freeman. Okay. I don't know if I need to set it up. I think you'll figure it out by the end, what's going on here. Okay. Sarah Penn's face as she rolled her pies had that expression of meek vigor which might have characterized one of the New Testament saints. She was making mince pies. Her husband, bear with me on this one, Adoniram Penn liked them better than any other kind. She baked twice a week. Adoniram often liked a piece of pie between meals. She hurried this morning. It had been later than usual when she had begun, and she wanted to have a pie baked for dinner. However deep a resentment she might be forced to hold against her husband, she would never fail in sedulous attention to his wants. Did I say that word right? I admit I don't know that word. Sedulous? Okay. Nobility of character manifests itself at loopholes when it is not provided with large doors. Sarah Penn's showed itself today in flaky dishes of pastry, so she made the pies faithfully, while across the table she could see, when she glanced up from her work, the sight that rankled in her patient and steadfast soul, the digging of the cellar of the new barn in the place where Adoniram 40 years ago had promised her their new house should stand. 40 years. 40 years. But, remember, the name of the story is called The Revolt of Mother. So just wait. You should read it. It's really good. And I won't spoil it. Yeah.
I will.
Anyway, yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm not going to get to everything that I wanted to read. But have you read, we talked about it, the series of novels, 21 novels by Patrick O'Brien, popularly referred to as the Aubrey Maturin series.
I have only seen the movie Master and Commander, I admit.
Yeah,
I've not read them.
And the movie wasn't bad. I mean, it gave Russell Crowe a chance to reprise his Maximus role, so that was fine. And some of the dialect was reminiscent of the novel, but for someone to and again, I've read this twice, and I don't consider myself a voracious reader, which I wish I were. I'm a voracious reader of news and commentary. It's hard to get that out of your system after doing it all your life. But books, I don't often get a lot of time for them. But I read all 21 of these novels through twice. and the Aubrey Maturin stories. I mean, on one hand, it's just swashbuckling good time. It's just just like the movie. There's tons of battles. I mean, Jack Aubrey is a captain in Lord Nelson's army during the Napoleonic War. And it's just an insight into life at sea, which itself is just so entertaining. I could throw out a whole bunch of sailing terms and stuff. I really felt like I knew what I was talking about, or I felt like I knew, and I've never been on a sailboat, ever in my life.
Really?
But just a wonderful story, story is such a wonderful series. The characters are you just fall in love with the characters. And of course, the two main ones, Jack Aubrey and Steve Maturin, who outwardly are completely different. I mean, you have Jack Aubrey, who is the son of an army general. He is loyal to the throne. He is constantly saying the wrong thing. He's kind of a they call him Goldilocks because he has long blonde hair, and he is anti-Catholic as people loyal to the throne were. And so Steve Maturin is half Irish and half Catalonian. so he fought in the Irish, fought for the Irish in Revolution or in the I'm probably misquoting and not saying it exactly right, but he is definitely part of the Irish resistance. Also, an advocate for Catalonian independence. So, in some ways, polar opposites of Jack Aubrey. Maturin is a physician, a surgeon, physician, I should say, and they meet in a cafe, and they strike up this friendship, which just lasted, 21 novels anyway. And they become very, very close friends. And Jack Aubrey, who is very much driven by prize money, which is how warships made the living for their crew in those days. And what's also interesting it's like baseball. I mean, cheating is part of the game, and there's honorable cheating, and there's just dishonorable cheating. I mean, it's just.
I don't know what you're talking about. Baseball doesn't have any cheating.
Yeah, this whole thing about stealing signals. I'm like, what's the big deal? We've been stealing signals forever. But anyway, I digress. And yet he has this incredible code of honor. I mean, that sometimes even trumps his own innate biases and bigotry. Like, he thinks slavery is an okay thing. At the time, he goes, he admits he wouldn't want to be a slave himself. But then he discovers that he has a child by an African-American woman who is the spitting image of him, but he's black. And Jack instantly falls in love with this guy who is entering the priesthood, if memory serves. It's been like 12 years longer than that since I've read this, which just shows you how the characters stick with you. But there's this one scene that I think, as far as what we're talking about with integrity, after Stephen has been captured by the French and tortured terribly, I mean, thumb screws and the whole bit, and he's been rescued.
Wait, how graphic does that get?
It's not terribly graphic,
okay.
but the we got another comment there. I try to show the comment. Anybody who makes comments, I'll make you famous.
Yeah.
Anyway, Stephen Maturin is staying in Jack Aubrey's house, and the scene is he's getting out of bed because he hears something outside, and he gets to unknown to Jack Aubrey, observe Jack Aubrey. And so I'm just going to read this passage, and it'll probably be the last thing we get to read tonight. And I apologize now to Adam Dingwall. I have your poem right here, Night Mail, but I don't think we're going to get to it tonight. So, and it was a stretch anyway. Just saying.
I don't think so, but okay. We enjoyed it before the broadcast.
Okay, so this book is from, or this passage is from the Commodore, and I can't tell you what number of novel that is. And get them. I swear, especially now, read these things. Men, women, you're going to love them. You would absolutely love them. Stephen had been put to sleep in his usual room, far from the children and noise, away in that corner of the house which looked down to the orchard and the bowling green. And in spite of his long absence, it was so familiar to him that when he awoke at about 3, he made his way to the window almost as quickly as if dawn had already broken, opened it, and walked out onto the balcony. The moon had set. There was barely a star to be seen. The still air was delightfully fresh with falling dew, and a late nightingale, in an indifferent voice, was uttering a routine jug-jug far down in Jack's plantations. Closer at hand and more agreeable by far, nightjars chirred in the orchard. 2 of them, or perhaps 3, the sound rising and falling, intertwining so that the source could not be made out for sure. There were few birds that he preferred to nightjars, but it was not they that had brought him out of bed. He stood leaning on the balcony rail, and presently Jack Aubrey, in his summer house by the bowling green, began again, playing very gently in the darkness, improvising wholly for himself, dreaming away on his violin with a mastery that Stephen had never heard equaled, though they had played together for years and years. Like many other sailors, Jack Aubrey had long dreamed of lying in his warm bed all night long. Yet although he could do so now with a clear conscience, he often rose at unchristian hours, particularly if he were moved by strong emotion, and crept from his bedroom in a watch coat to walk about the house, or into the stables, or to pace the bowling green. Sometimes he took his fiddle with him. He was, in fact, a better player than Stephen, and now that he was using his precious Garnieri, if I'm saying that right, rather than a robust seagoing fiddle, the difference was still more evident. But the Garnieri did not account for the whole of it, nor anything like. Jack certainly concealed his excellence when they were playing together, keeping to Stephen's mediocre level. This had become perfectly clear when Stephen's hands were at last recovered from the thumb screws and other implements applied by the French counterintelligence officers in Minorca. But on reflection, Stephen thought it had been the case much earlier. since quite apart from his delicacy at that period, Jack hated showing away. Now, in the warm night, there was no one to be comforted, kept in countenance. No one could scorn him for virtuosity, and he could let himself go entirely. And as the grave and subtle music wound on, Stephen once more contemplated on the apparent contradiction between the big, cheerful, florid CO officer, whom most people liked on sight, but who had never been described as subtle or capable of subtlety by any one of them, except perhaps his surviving opponents in battle, and the intricate, reflective music he was now creating, so utterly unlike his limited vocabulary and words, at times verging on the inarticulate. My hands have now regained the moderate ability they possessed before I was captured, observed Maturin, but his have gone on to a point I never thought he could reach, his hands and his mind. I am amazed. In his own way, he's the secret man of the world. And it's funny because I don't have any of these books in the house anymore. I gave them away to somebody who I thought would really appreciate them, a whole series. And I was trying to think, what could I read, and how can I find it without downloading or buying all the books? But I remembered that scene and was able to find it on the internet and find out what book it was in. So, yeah. And, again, this idea of not wanting to show away. I mean, these guys have been playing together for years, and he maintained that, for the sake of his friendship. Mm-hmm. I just thought that was just so poignant for what we were talking about and wanted to share. And I'm always looking for somebody to talk about Captain Jack Aubrey and Stephen Maturin with, and there's very rarely anybody around that can do that. So this is your assignment, Amy, should you choose to accept it.
Go read the books.
Go read all 21 of them.
I know where I can break quarantine and get them.
Okay.
Or at least one or two, but would I do that? I don't know. Maybe they'll be left gently outside the door.
For a book? I mean, geez. So,
maybe.
Yeah. Well, this was fun. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And everybody check out the blog. Not the blog, the podcast. I'm sorry. There is a blog too. You can check that out too.
We don't have a blog. I keep saying I'm going to blog, but
yeah. But the podcast is really, really good. And hey, you can go back and listen to the episode I was on.
Yeah, the two. I think there were two. So far. Yeah.
One recording too. Yeah, you're cheating. You're not going live like you got to.
It's true.
Go live.
You don't want to hear us live.
Sure, I do. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a good night here from Burley Corners, and I hope to see you next week. Be safe, be healthy, and we will see you soon. Bye.